to start, we're just going to start with talk to us about the type of assessment you served on last year and what your favorite part was, your experience, how it went, and any learnings you might have had.
Okay, so I was, last year I was on my 4th GSA. My favorite part, I think, it's my favorite part of any examination cycle is really doing that deep dive into really understanding an organization, finding out what makes them tick, and then providing them valuable feedback that can make a difference for them, right? So they can get better. That's always my favorite part of any assessment that I've done, and the relationships that you build with your team, right? So, you know, one of the things I love about Sterling is the relationships that you make, and that you make these relationships with high-performing individuals, no matter what sector or industry they're in, right? So it's a bunch of like-minded people sharing ideas and being creative, and I really enjoy that.
So you started with the deep dive, right? So a lot of times in Sterling, we can get very jargony with Sterlingese, and we use words that maybe aren't very common to just everyday language. So we talk a lot about one of the skills that Sterling will fine tune for you being your business acumen and your ability to understand the different ways in which people do business. So when you talk about that deeper dive, that really is a connection to what makes that business tick, that business acumen, understanding how they operate their processes from kind of that systems perspective and down. Did you find that challenging as an early examiner early on in your career?
Yeah, as a young examiner, yes. I mean, and it's a maturation issue, right? So as a young examiner, you get very focused in on what criteria says and seeing how they can satisfy that criteria item. But it's later on that it's important that you take a step back and understand what that really means to the organization. You know, in making those connections. You know, for me as a new examiner, I imagine all new examiners do that same thing. There's value in taking a step back and better understanding the so what part, right? So in all the implications that so what can have across categories. And that's where you really start to see these themes, and those themes and those challenges are what is part of the feedback that can make that company better. So yeah, you know, as a young examiner, you kind of get locked into criteria, but there is great value in taking a step back and understanding what it all means, why it's important, the so what part that we talk about in training, right? So what? And tying those things back to that business acumen part. What's it mean for that organization to do this better? So yeah, and I think, you know, the longer you stay with Sterling, the better you can appreciate that so what piece. Yeah.
Do you remember your aha moment?
I've had a few. You know, I guess when it took a couple of years to get it to where I could take that step back, where you don't feel so overwhelmed. Like, you know, the first year you're like, am I even doing this right? Am I even on the right pathway here? Which is one of the things I really value about our training now, and the pathway we go through with the whole mentorship process, right? I think that's becoming a little better. And so to always have somebody to lean on to say, hey, this is where I'm at. Does this make sense to you? And have somebody to lean on. I guess it was probably maybe my 3rd year where it all started to come around, where you get more familiar with criteria and you can take a step. And especially when you've been on a couple of assessment cycles and you're the category lead in different categories, because then you can harken back on, I remember that when I was a category 3 lead, what it meant to do this thing and the implications it had on 5 or 2 or I think it was probably my 3rd year, but I think every year I have an aha moment. Every year I do this, I learn something else, and I'm able to connect the dots just a little bit better. And then leaning on, you know, the more veteran folks that have been doing this, master examiner level folks that have been doing this for 10 plus years, you know, having that to lean on is really important too. So any new examiners, you know, 1st, 2nd, even 3rd year examiners, even me as a whatever year examiner I am, leaning on some of those folks to get some insight from them it will be one of the things that I think will be missing now that we're going virtual, is that, during those breaks where you can, lean over and ask, a Debbie Voss or a Laura McNeil or, Cindy Brislin, any number of people that have been doing this for a long time, and say, hey, what about this? Am I on the right path here? Just that informal kind of questioning, I think goes a long way. So, one of the things about, I'll use a Sterlingese, the agility of the organization in going virtual. I think they've done a yeoman's job they did the examiner recognition and they did the award, reception and that recognition all virtually. And now there's a whole new line of offerings through the Talk Tuesday thing that we do now, and through these upcoming classes with, the leadership classes that are being offered virtually. So it did open up a whole new line of offerings that Sterling can have. And hopefully when this gets a little more mature, Sterling will be the place to go for, leadership acumen and some of those things. At least that's my hope, is that we can put ourselves out there as the go-to place for performance excellence and for, business improvement and business acumen and leadership. I think that would be ideal. That Sterling, they did a good job with all of those things. And I have no doubt that training will be the same. I'm sure it'll be a home run, just like the examiner recognition was and the awards were. It'll be interesting to see how that's pulled off.
Yeah, I'm interested too, especially since Bob and I are teaching Criteria 101 and evaluating apps. So I'm excited to see how we pull that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you guys are going to do a great job. I mean, it's, the exciting piece is that we're not just replacing one for one. We're doing all of these new things, right? So that's really exciting. And I really do think it demonstrates the growth of Sterling and where we're going.
So I like your segue, because my next question was actually about training and the fact that we are going virtual, right? So what part about this virtual training are you personally looking forward to?
Not wearing pants. No, it's just that. It's just to see how it's pulled off, right? So everyone has done such a good job with all of these events that we've had to this point. It'll be interesting to me that, how we get that, right? And just like we talked about in some of these Talk Tuesdays, when you're here, doing these Zoom meetings or WebEx or whatever mechanism, the challenge is, how do you remain authentic, right? So I think the same will be for training. And then to engage newer examiners in, hey, how do you guys feel about this? Are you comfortable with where we are? What do we need to talk about more? What do we need to explain a little bit better? And that I think it will be a challenge for you guys to get those younger. You remember the first year you were an examiner, you're like, I don't even want to say anything because it's really overwhelming at this point. Not just first year, but second year. It will, if you think you're overwhelmed in a room, think about how overwhelmed you're going to feel like this, right? So overcoming that challenge, I think, will be probably the biggest hurdle that you guys face. But again, I'm sure you guys will pull it off. You've pulled everything else off. So I'm sure you guys will you'll hit a home run again.
Did you by chance pick up on the fact that these trainings used to be a full day and now we're offering them in 3 hours?
I did notice that. And that's, there's less time that you have to eat, lemon squares. But, just like when we talk about this, when you have a meeting and they talk about these Zoom meetings and these online virtual meetings are much, much shorter than in-person meetings, because you don't have that, that kind of, chit chat time before or after. And I think there's value in that chit chat time. At least there is for me, because I'm more, I like to be in person. I like to have those conversations. But again, I do like the fact that you're able to shrink it. How do you get the engagement that you would normally have in person will be the challenge. And that level of engagement is what fills up a lot of that time, right? Those conversations, those informal conversations you have during breaks, and some of those dialogues that you have, and just getting to know people. You know, one of the biggest benefits of being a Sterling examiner and being in this pool of people are those relationships that you build, right? And then I've said before on more than one occasion that, you know, that adage of, you know, it's not, you know, what you know, it's who you know. Well, yeah, I believe that. It is who you know, and in leveraging your network to be able to get better and make your organization better, I think is probably more important than what you know, right? You know, that I think that'll be probably the biggest challenge of this virtual training is that networking and that connection, making those connections, which is another reason why the Talk Tuesday, the informal kind of lunch and learn things are really important.
So, so you spark ideas in me quite often when we chat, right? So when you did it again, good job. So I'm thinking about, right, so that piece of that networking and the training, that piece that's missing. Do you think that there might be a way that we could branch off of these formalized trainings and do maybe some kind of follow-up Q&A thing? Or like, do you think people might find value in that, where they get out of training and now maybe they're in case study mode before 3-day training?
Yeah, I think that
in some kind of Q&A format.
Yeah, I think that I don't know what format. I haven't put a whole lot of thought into that, but I think it's certainly going to require a lot more communication, right? So instead of just leaving with a case study and then coming back and every once in a while talking to your mentor, maybe it's a weekly check-in, right? Not unlike you do with your team at work, right? Whether that's a daily check-in or a weekly check-in. Hey, how is everything going? Are we making progress on this thing? Where are you? Do you have any questions? So while you said, you know, before that, well, we've shortened this thing from a full day to now 3 hours. I think those hours are probably going to be made up later on virtually, right. But that time is going to probably be made up later on with just this ongoing communication with examiners as they go through the training protocol.
All right. So in training, I know every year when you go through an assessment, right, we learn something new, right? But what part of training do you feel really kind of sets you up to be the best prepared for site?
Well, now I think it's, you know, we've changed the training over the past couple of years. Yep. So, you know, there's more of an emphasis on the systems thinking piece and the business acumen piece. Before it was like, here's criteria, here's how we apply it, here's how we write a comment. And then, but you know, again, it's the importance of the so what. What does that mean to them? And how can they use that feedback to get better? That's what I think sets examiners up for better success. Because you can find an OFI somewhere and it may not mean anything to them, right? It's not important to them at all. So it's not very valuable feedback with improving their business or improving their operation. So it's, in my view, it's the recent changes they made to training with more of an emphasis on systems thinking and business acumen piece that I think are set examiners up and examination teams up for better success when they're on site.
Right, because we provide you a resource guide with all the criteria. Within that resource guide are notes that help you if you have a question on criteria items, right? So I think you're right. I think that adjustment to, okay, let's look at this thing big picture, right? So we want our examiners to be able to look at an organization systems wide. So we need to actually look at the framework with that same kind of vantage point. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I too have found that to be very valuable in the training shift that we've seen over the past few years. And I'm actually a little bit jealous that they didn't do that my first year as an examiner, because I really just felt like I had a process coming at me through a fire hose, and I was lucky I remembered steps 4 and 8.
Yeah. Well, it's like that with every new examiner, right? It's very overwhelming. And the people that have started that are on the fence about coming back, I try to tell them, this is like, it's like riding a bike. You know, you just once you get it, you get it. Sometimes you're going to feel like you fall. Sometimes you're going to feel like you're stumbling. but when you get it, it'll all come into the clouds will clear and there will be clarity at some point. And when you get that clarity, at least for me, I was better able to do my job, right? As an environmental scientist and understand systems thinking and business acumen and what it all meant. And of course, here I own a goat yoga business. So I apply these same principles to a goat yoga business, and it's increased my top and bottom line both. So the business is getting better when I apply this to something as ridiculous as goat yoga. So it works, right?
There's nothing ridiculous about goat yoga. I just want to say there's nothing ridiculous about that. It's a perfect pairing.
Yeah, right. Right.
So we talk a lot about those examiners who go through those first couple of years, and it's almost like a struggle to, what's the point? But what would you tell those examiners who are like, oh, I went through it for a year, I got it, I'm good?
Yeah,
what would you
no.
get them to bring them back?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody has gone through it for a year and said, no, I did it, I'm good, I know it. I would just say, like anything else, the more you do it, the better you are at it, right? So trying to think of the guy that said, author that wrote the book about if you got to, in order to perfect something, you got to do it for 10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell, I think it was Gladwell, wrote the book. And he talks about, you have, in order to be an expert at anything, you have to put in the time. Just like anything else, I don't believe that anybody can do this for a year and think that they are proficient at it. I've been doing it 5 or 6 years and I'm not as proficient as I want to be, right? And I think if you talk to more veteran folks with Sterling, they would tell you that every year they learn something new, right? And that's kind of what this thing is all about, right? Continuous improvement, getting better at your craft. And so if this is your craft, the more you do it, the better you're going to get and the more you're going to learn. And then you can apply those learnings to what you're doing, right? So I would argue that doing it for a year, doing it for 5 years, doing it for 10 years, there's always an opportunity for improvement. So I would just challenge them to say, after that first year, if it is difficult, these are sometimes difficult concepts to grasp, right? When you talk about integration and what does that really mean? Those are sometimes can be very difficult for young examiners and for not so young examiners. So, the more you do it, the better you get. And if this is going to be a part of who you are and a part of the service that you provide your organization or your community, then I would encourage them to press on, continue doing it.
Especially because some of that challenge is, I think we often forget that when we get a new examiner, where they're coming from and the place they are in their professional life is they are a high-performing, overachieving, extremely competent, and quite often subject matter expert in their own sector and in their own office, right? Then you come to Sterling training, and you're now the new kid who doesn't know anything, and you're trying to learn all of this language and jargon and concept and from the ground up, right? And that's new for us. We don't remember being the new kid in the office who doesn't know and needs someone to teach them everything.
Right. No, and yeah, I agree with you. And so very often it's the examiners that our pool of examiners now, they all have this this innate thing that they want to get better, right? So even if I think I'm the best ecologist on the planet, there's something that I can always get better at. And so there is at least the examiners that I've known and, the time that I've been part of this organization, there's always that innate drive, they always want to get better. That's what pulls me. That's what keeps me here is being around those people that want to get better every day, right?
My husband just got home, so I'm like, shh, we're recording. So in this day and age, there are a plethora of professional development opportunities everywhere you turn around on social media, in your work email, whatever it is, somebody's sending you something, come here, do this training, this is the path, this is the thing. So why Sterling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I guess it depends on who the audience is, right? So the first thing I would say is, do you want chaos or do you want a plan? Do you want discipline or disorder, right? The framework, Sterling Baldrige framework, provides discipline. And it reminds me of something that Jim Collins, right? Jim Collins, good to great fame, very well known in this industry, said, I see the Baldrige process as a powerful set of mechanisms for disciplined people engaged in disciplined thought and taking disciplined action to create great organizations that produce great results. Mic drop, right? Like, I can't think that's the best way to frame this, right? It's disciplined people undergoing disciplined thought, taking disciplined action to make organizations better so they have better results. I mean, that's, let me look on here. I just want to say something else. I used this in a presentation. Let me see if I can find it. Keep losing video. There you are. Okay. Let me read this. One of the things that always struck me about this is Jim Collins. One of the things that always struck me about the Baldrige process is it's a way of institutionalizing a culture of discipline. We're talking about making an entire cultural ethos where everyone is engaged in a systematic, methodical, consistent approach to making things work better day upon day, week upon week, year upon year, over a long period of time. That's what this is. That's what we're all about, right? And so I would say, I've been not a Sterling examiner for that long, but I started studying Deming in the mid-90s. So I've been kind of in this world a little bit. When I started studying TQM and those things, that was kind of the beginning of all this, as far as so why Sterling? Well, if not Sterling, then what else, right? Do you want to take a TQM approach? Do you want the Europeans have something that is very similar. I can't remember what they call it, but if you look at the Baldrige process and Sterling and all of those have the underpinnings of Deming's TQM. So I don't care what language you say it in, they all kind of say the same thing. Deming's 14 points are somewhere in criteria or core values of Sterling, somewhere. So none of this is new, right? It's the beauty of this is, and we have to remember where Baldrige came from. The reason Baldrige exists, the purpose of Baldrige is that they wanted to increase the competitiveness of US businesses in a global economy. So in order to do that, they spanned the country and they found the highest performing organizations and looked at the attributes that they all had in common. That's what became criteria. Right? And then the beauty of that criteria is they continue to do this year after year. They look at the landscape, they evaluate applicants and award winners and see what makes them great companies. And then they take that and they improve the criteria. They introduce new criteria. So it's this evolution. Sterling criteria today is the evolution of Deming and Baldrige and all of those things that have been happening in this country for decades, right? So it is the evolved processes of performance excellence that are improved every single year. That's what I would say is what keeps me going. So if it's, that improvement year over year and what Jim Collins talked about, like getting better day to day, week to week, year to year, that's exactly what Deming would expect, right? So why Sterling? If it's a CEO asking me why Sterling, I would say because it is the model, it's the best model for performance excellence you can find in the world, and it works. If you, Amie, are asking me why Sterling, I would say, based on why Baldrige even exists, I would say why Sterling? I'm a patriot and I want to see US companies maintain their position as the strongest. So where the United States maintains their position as the strongest economy in the world. Cue the fireworks and eagle flying over my shoulder. right? USA.
And I feel like you touched upon a really good reason and justification for why come back, right? Because you can say, oh, I've done the Sterling thing for 5 years. I figured it out. I understand it. But the reality is competition and businesses are changing every day, right? So if you say, okay, that's it, I've got it, but in every other year, criteria is getting readdressed because companies are improving. So how are you staying aware and abreast of what the best of the best is doing right now if you say, oh, the last time I was an examiner was 5 years ago, but that's okay because I was good, I mastered it.
Well, think about this. So I talked about US companies maintaining their position as leading the you know, we have the strongest economy on the globe. Well, China has the second strongest economy in the world, and our position, just because of their population, they have the second largest economy in the world as measured by GDP. So if we want to maintain that position, we have to recognize where China is. And now, and I think it was like 1980 where China was admitted into the World Trade Organization. Before then, they weren't doing much of this at all, right? So then they started TQM and they started looking at quality. Well, now they are adopting Baldrige on a very rapid scale. So they're going to have the same tools that we have at looking organizations. So we have to be sure that we maintain a significant advantage over not just China, but anybody in maintaining our position in the global economy. I think that's really important. So the same way you and I are driven towards serving our community to create a better future, we are also serving our community and our state in evaluating businesses so they can get better, so they can compete on a global scale in a global marketplace.
Awesome. Awesome. So that's really all the questions I have for you.
Okay.
You're a rock star. We appreciate the crap out of your input, your opinions, your vantage point, and for taking the time to hang with us right now.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Is there anything that you feel like you have to say that maybe I missed, like in this interview process, like anything that you just need to share?
You know, I think it's important for all of us to, selling it is the wrong word. I don't think we ought to sell it. I think it sells itself. But I think it's important, and the reason I wanted to interview Nikki last week, that we want to have leaders of organizations, CEOs, people in C-suites, understand the value of Sterling, understand the value of Baldrige, and understand why we do this, right? And understand the value that it can bring to their organization, in their community, and their budgets. So, you know, they talk about a 1-minute elevator speech, right? If you're trapped in an elevator for a minute and you're in with a CEO, how would you promote Sterling? And so I think about that, right? I think about how we can best promote this, because you and I both know it works, and organizations are better because they adopt these philosophies, because they pursue this thing. I've seen it with my own eyes. So how can we get through to more people so more people adopt this, so their organizations run better, so they can generate more revenue, so they can, you know, so counties can increase their tax base based on their performance. And there's this ripple effect through the entire economy. So how do we get this word out, right? That's I think for more senior examiners, I think that's the new challenge. Now it's not only going to do a site visit every year, it's you becoming an ambassador for Sterling, becoming an ambassador for this program, because we all know it works, and we know that organizations will be better for it.
Well, thank you for being one of our ambassadors.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure. I believe in it. So it's, I think I need to make t-shirts that I heart Sterling.
Right? I'd wear one.
I know you would.
Notice I didn't say I'd buy one. I said I'd wear it.
Okay. We'll see if we can, maybe a GoFundMe account to. Thanks, Amie. It was a pleasure.
Hey, always. Take care.